Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today we're going to explain the station of exhibitionism. I'm sharing with you my PDF. So the station of exhibitionism is one of the stations which is related to the risk assessment together with history taking and psychosexual assessment. Please pay attention that this is a very close station to erotomania, which I have posted the explanation of it before. And I highly recommend that you study both of them together, very close in their approach, very close, nearly the same set of questions. And I highly recommend that you have similar set of questions for different stations. This will help you to pass the stations, having different dialogues for every 120 stations, something which is very difficult. So let's see what is the story of this station. In the station, you will be in the emergency room, and the police will bring for you a patient because he has been exposing himself in public. And your task is to take history and establish a diagnosis and pay attention to the task. This means that you must establish a clinical diagnosis at the end. So the candidates who are able to reach to the station to the stage of delivering the diagnosis and telling it in a professional way will have an edge over those who do not do this. Okay, it differs from just taking history and risk assessment. This means that not delivering the diagnosis is not a big issue. So what is written in the role player's note, which is not written in the candidate's note, and the role player's note, he is instructed not to be happy. He's angry because he's talking with you. He's angry being brought by the police. He's angry because the neighbors are made this police report. And pay attention that he will not be cooperative in the beginning of the station. It is part of the instruction of the page that he will not be cooperative, he will not be forthcoming. And definitely, this duration of not being cooperative or not being forthcoming differs from one candidate to another. If the candidate is good and empathetic and has good communication skills, definitely this duration will be less. And even the attitude of the role player will be less defensive and less challenging other than the candidates who do not pay attention to the communication skills and they just want to cover the points of the station. The role player can be very challenging in his attitude in the station. As I always say, you must have a particular plan for every task in order to make sure that you're going to cover the most important points in the task. Okay, going through the task blindly with your past experience of psychiatry is not enough. You just must make sure that you cover all the important points and must make sure that you understand how you are assessed by the examiner to make sure that you pass. So in this context, in our PDF and our plan, uh, you have 7 points. The first point is the introduction, and do not underestimate this point because the introduction is the way you introduce yourself, the way by which you give the first impression. If you're not able to introduce yourself, if you're not able to greet the patient in the right way, with his right name, and explain for him the setting for which you are talking with him, particularly in this type of stations in which the role player is not happy talking with you. If you don't have a good introduction in the very first beginning of the station, this will not be helpful for you, particularly if it is a station in the afternoon. I've heard from one of the consultants that they just assess the candidate according to 1 or 2 minutes in the very first beginning. And you have to be honest with yourself. If you're not able to introduce yourself and don't have these basic communication skills, don't blame anyone if he did not give you a good mark in the mark sheet. After introducing yourself, you are going to assess the event for which the police has sent this patient for you. This is your priority, not the delusion, nothing else. This is the risk assessment station. So There is an event which should be assessed, and you assess it in the ABC technique. And I will go through this later on to rapidly go through it. Then the symptom of syndrome here, the symptom of the syndrome is the psychosexual history of the patient. And then you have points number 4, 5, 6. These are typical points in the history and risk assessment or the history task. And this is what makes the history or the history and risk assessment stations to some extent easy, because as you can see, the variation is only in the very first 3 points. The comorbidity assessment, the same set of questions for all the stations. Likewise, the questions for the impact, coping, and risk, the past history and family history, all these have the same set of questions. And eventually delivering the diagnosis differs from one station to another according to the scenario, according to the syndrome of the patient. But make sure that you are able to cover all this in 7 minutes. That's why it is very important to prepare to the task by practicing, not reading, in order to fit all what is required to cover all these points in 7 minutes. This is not something you can do it by just reading the material, whatever the material is. And now again to the empathy, which I always stress on the point of empathy, because it is a major part on your in your communication skills, and actually it is one of the most lacking communication skills in the international medical graduates, because simply the English language is not our first language. So your mind is busy forming the sentences and you miss what is known as the appropriate reciprocal emotional interaction. You are supposed to show the appropriate reciprocal reaction whenever the role player elaborates a particular emotion. But most of the time, because the candidates are busy forming the sentences by their mind, they miss this important part in the communication skills. Here are some sentences which will help you to form, to show empathy. You don't need more than 4 to 5 sentences, but make sure that you use them in the right way. The most important time in which you should show empathy and you should pay attention to the feelings of the patient, the most important time is in the very first beginning, when the patient starts to talk, when the patient starts to express his feelings towards anything which you are going to discuss with him. Then going rapidly through the ABC technique, simply you are going to assess the incidents according to a time-wise approach, what happened during the incidents, what happened before the incidents, and then what happened after the incidents. And under each heading, you are going to check the factual information and the mental state of the patient. For example, in the incidents, you want to check factual information like when did this happen, who was there, where, what happened exactly, and the mental state of the patient, like what was in your mind when you did this, how were you feeling, did you take anything which can alter your mind, like alcohol, something like this. And likewise, you're going to assess what happened after the incidents and before the incidents. If you want to go through details about this technique, you can check the history and risk assessment clip in my channel of task tutorials. And then let's go through how we are going to tackle this station. Now, in the introduction, simply you greet the patient, you introduce yourself, and you explain the reason for this discussion or the reason for the setting with the patient. But in the stations in which there is some sort of the patient is not happy, there's some sort of challenge with the patient because he is not happy talking with you. You must add something to your introduction. So here you can say to him, I know that this is a sensitive situation, but I'm here to help you. And in order to do this, I would like to ask some questions. Are you okay to proceed? Okay. And then ask him some information about himself. And this step is very good to approach from my perspective and from what I did before in such stations in my exams and what the candidates did. and even the candidates which I am personal tutoring, start professionally, smoothly. Ask him some questions about himself. I would like to start by knowing some information about you. I want to know more, you more. Do you have a job? Has this always been your job? Are you married or have a partner? Anyone living with you? This information does not only show that you are professional and you are dealing with a negative patient or a defensive patient in a smooth way and gradually approaching the sensitive issues, but also will help you cover important parts of the history taking and the risk, because we know the job and the permanency of the job and being married or not and having the social context around it, all these are related to the risk factors. If you have a look at the history and the clinic and risk assessment risk factors, all these are important points in assessing the risk. And also it covers also important part in the history taking, which is the social part of the patient. Okay, so this is what I prefer. I don't prefer going through directly what happened and the psychosexual history. Try to make your approach more smooth in order not to clash with the patient. Now the ABC of the event. Start smoothly also when you assess the event. I would like to start by knowing your part of the story about what has happened and ask him, according to the ABC approach, the incidents, what happened after the incidents and what happened before the incidents. And don't forget, before the incidents, ask him if there has been any stresses lately. We know that exhibitionism also related to stress, not only sexual paraphilia now, also related to stress, and ask him if this is the first time to have such allegations set against him. This is regarding before the incidents. And during the incidents, ask him if there has been any alcohol or street drugs taken during what happened, and if there has been any sexual arousal after the incident also. Definitely you say, I beg your pardon, and I will say anything which, yeah, just to neutralize or sugarcoat these sensitive questions like, I beg your pardon, I would like to ask you some personal question. Ask him if he had sexual arousal and after the incident, if there's been any sort of sexual activity like masturbation and so on. And then the symptoms of syndrome of the psychosexual history. Again, this is a sensitive area, and for the international medical graduates, particularly the lady doctors, they feel timid while they are asking these questions, sometimes reluctant. And the Royal College, I don't think that they are happy with this attitude. They expect from you to be professional as a member of the Royal College. So you must practice regularly how to do a psychosexual assessment. Okay. And having said this, again, these are the same set of questions in the station of erotomania. So I highly recommend if you practice one of them, you practice also the station of the other station with the erotomania and the exhibitionism, very close to each other. So you go through this sensitive area smoothly, also saying because of the nature of the allegations, I would like to ask you some personal questions. Are you okay with that? And ask him if he has been in a relation before. Then ask him how would he describe his sexual life, if there has been any sexual preferences, does he prefer to use anything from the adult child? And there's a pivotal question if there is any sexual interest in anything other than an adult female. Definitely, if there is any other interest, it needs further assessment. Ask him, would he watch pornography, and if it includes children, and if he has ever had an intimate relation with a child. Ask him if his name is in the sexual offender register, and about his childhood, if there has been any traumatic experiences. And definitely this includes the sexual assault. There are tens of questions in this area of the psychosexual assessment. I've picked up the most uh, comprehensive questions, which will help you to cover this area in depth and professionally. If you want to add more questions, okay, but make sure that you have 7 minutes time limit, so you don't exceed or go in depth in this area. My advice: you will never cover 100% any area in 7 minutes in any station. Okay, just make sure that you cover it in enough depth. Okay, then when you finish this psychosexual history, we will go to the routine part of the task of the psychosexual or the history and risk or the history task. The rest of the points are just routine questions, the same questions in all the stations of history taking and all the stations of the history and risk with very subtle variations. In the comorbidity, we're going to check if there are any problems in any other areas related to the biopsychosocial areas of the patient. Pay attention that we have already covered the social part in the beginning when we were asking about social life, health, job, and family, and so on. So we want to cover by screening questions the psychological problems and the physical problems. Okay, how was your mood in the past 2 weeks, etc., and if there has been any strange experience, etc., and so on. And then the impact, coping, and risk. Again, these are the typical questions. Ask him how does he cope with stress, any alcohol or street drugs, any thoughts of harming himself, and the only subtle variation if he has any intentions to confront his neighbors, and ask him if there has been any police charges. So these are the typical routine questions, and except for the confronting of the neighbors, which is related to the scenario. Again, the questions related to the questions related to the past history and family history are the same questions. And then delivering the diagnosis eventually, you say to him, thank you for sharing with me all this information from our discussion. There could be a psychological problem behind these allegations. This problem we call exhibitionism. I would like to have another talk with you for further assessment and to see how we can help. Okay. This is if you are able to cover all this professionally with the appropriate empathetic approach, definitely this will help you to pass. According to my experience with myself in passing such stations, and also with the candidates whom I've helped to pass the stations of the history with risk assessment, and particularly this stations. Again, pay attention that whenever you are going to practice, make your references the mark sheet, not your personal or the subjective evaluation of your study partner. I highly recommend that whenever you are going to practice, always assess yourself and your partner according to this mark sheet. Also in the PDF, you will find some materials. These materials just will help you to refresh your memory, because whenever you have some good information and your memory is refreshed about the material which you are studying, definitely this will make you more confident. We don't want to go through textbook evaluation, textbook reading and preparation. I highly don't do that. Don't do this. Don't go through textbooks. The preparation for the task is by practicing. If you want to refresh your memory, just go through some visual materials rapidly, like this will refresh your memory. You don't need more than this. I hope that you found this material helpful. If you want more details about this mark sheet, you can go to the erotomania station. There is some sort of explanation about this mark sheet, which is the most important point. Just say we are talking about it. This is the most important thing in all the preparation. Make sure that you cover the most of the boxes in your performance. I hope that you find it helpful. If you are interested in this PDF, it is present in my site, www.tasktutorials.com. And if you need some sort of personal coaching and tutoring, also this can be arranged on my site, www.tasktutorials.com. Thank you so much.